Welcome to the Naked Gospel, where shame has no power, God's glory is boundless, and we get to carry that story in our bodies. Here we have conversations about sex, singleness, marriage, pornography, parenting, everything beyond and in between. We're featured on every major podcast platform, as well as YouTube. So please like, subscribe, share, so that you can join the movement that is already achieving a revival of sexual integrity throughout the entire kingdom. Hey, you're here with Whaler and Sam Jolman, a return special guest. We treated him so good the last time, he just had to come back. He said, please, let's do a part two. I think when I was getting ready to say, hey, we've got some fisticuffs waiting to happen, we got to do this again, as I was saying that, you were also saying, hey, can we come back and do this another time? So we were in synchrony from the very beginning, Sam.
That's right. Yeah,
so it's been some weeks. What's new with you?
Well, summer is happening in full swing, and that is been joyful. And obviously, as parents who are working, managing, engaging our sons in the process. But we've got some adventures on the calendar, and we're going to go camping this weekend. So excited for that. I was able to finally release a study guide for my book. Yay. And it's free, even
Huge.
better. So, I just crossed the 1 year mark of this beauty being out in the world. And
let's
beauty,
see that
because
thing
I
loud
like
and
the
proud
cover
in the frame. I want to see that. There we go. The sex talk you never got.
Yes. I call it a beauty. Some have asked even, what is that on the cover of your book? It's actually fire. It's a artistic representation of fire. It's a reference to Song of Songs 8, about love's passion burning with like fire, the very flame of the Lord. That there's, the roots of your passion are in the Spirit of God. So anyway, that was what we tried to do. But yes, study guide is out. It's free. It was the most requested thing that I've gotten from folks over this last year is, hey, is there a study guide? How do we do this? Now, there have obviously been groups of men that have jumped in and just found their way, which I kind of have enjoyed hearing their feedback, like yourself, of, where did it take you? What were the topics? And, but tried to put some of that a little more intentionally in a study guide. So it's free on my website if anybody wants to get it. You just have to sign up for my Substack, which is also free. So would love to meet you there as well in the comments of my Substack.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll make sure to put those links in the show notes so people can easily find their way to you.
Thank you.
And I appreciate the additional labor of love that is on your part to make the thing and then also make it available, because what you want is for people to find themselves environed in an atmosphere where it's very likely they'll be enchanted with the right kind of beauty, and to find that heart burning in them so that they're not just contending with the ugly allure of the world.
Yes.
Right? You want them seeing the very best things and finding that in themselves as well.
Yes. When I've reflected in prayer, as I'm praying over readers and what do I hope is the impact of this book, and what do I want, from this process of being an author and putting that book out there, the thing that's come to my heart most is I want a revolution of lovers. Like I want, if we began to have language amidst the masculine culture of being a good lover, right? And that means, in the realm of sex, to your wife, to your spouse, yes, that you know the ways of being emotionally, relationally, and physically intimate with your partner, with your spouse. That would be amazing. But also, like you're naming, right? The being a lover to the world, being able to take in the glory of God without feeling a need to consume it, right? To want to belong to it, to want to join it, to be, I think it's Eugene Peterson that said, beauty is meant to lead you to a desire to want to say thank you to someone. And he would say that at some level, that's the roots of our spiritual longing, is not just the problem of pain, but the problem of beauty, right? And that beauty is meant to lead to something, to gratitude, to worship. And so that would be my hope, is that, a revolution of lovers, men that don't just work hard, don't just suffer grit, but can actually fall in love with the world and the people around them too.
Yeah, most of. When your book is a year old and it's gotten the kind of circulation that it has, have you received any feedback that was discouraging to you?
I had one podcaster, not in a negative way, take on, I took on the concept of purity, as sexual purity, as a goal of your sexuality or an aim of your sexuality, and describe purity only sexual ethic, purity only sexual ethic as harmful, and that if you don't also have a place for awe, if you don't also have a place to be moved, as I say, right, that you that Song of Songs verse, that your passion, your sexual passion, has its roots in the very flame of the Lord, that love has its roots in the flame of the Lord, that there isn't a place, if there isn't a place for awe and sensuality and an experience of beauty, something has died, or we're killing off something inside that was meant to live. And he took me to point on that and said, that how could you say that? And what I understood from his story is purity had been such an inviting invitation to him and such a help to him in coming out of his own story, his own broken family, not a Christian life, not a Christian family. And I'm certainly not saying that purity goes away. It is a part of the journey with sexuality. But I think we've made it this aim. I think it's a step along the way. Purity in the Old Testament was always preparation for worship, right? Mm-hmm. Purify yourselves. You're about to meet God, right? Like on Sinai, Mount Sinai. And so I think it is a part of the process, right? We do have to live aware of what we're doing with our sexuality clearly. But I think if we don't also honor you were meant to be moved, we end up snuffing something out. So that was one topic, one place where I got some pushback. Another was on just the idea of, I had a very meaningful 2-star review on Amazon that a woman wrote, I didn't know you could be moved and actually like a 2-star review. But I appreciated she had actually read the book. She had actually taken it to heart. She was thoughtful about her response. She wasn't insulting. But she said, I'm troubled by this idea that my husband might be moved by another woman's beauty.
Right.
And, that feels like more pressure to me to have to compete. And I'm just not sure that that's a good vision in so many words. Mm-hmm. And, she even wondered, am I just trying to justify my hidden lusts as a writer? Am I trying to do that for men? But I understood, if you're in a marriage where you aren't most moved by your wife's beauty, then something is wrong. Mm-hmm. If your eyes are elsewhere and you aren't most enthralled by your wife, that would create a feeling of betrayal or just your heart is elsewhere. And beauty is this thing, I think we've taken it to be, we have a very emaciated view of human beauty in our culture. We see it as a certain set of standards for how a body looks tends to be these days more pornified. Right, the amount of, especially these days, the amount of fillers, right, that people inject in their lips and their cheeks and their eyebrows, their foreheads, right, so they don't get the wrinkles and right and plastic surgery and breast augmentation, and there's such a kind of pornified view of beauty that is being held up. What I talk about in my book is the truest beauty is moral beauty. There's a writer, Dacher Keltner, he's a researcher, and he would say we are most moved to awe for other human beings living with what he calls moral beauty, which is courage, virtue, the overcoming stories, right? Like that moves us with people. And so, I've thought about this woman, and I don't know her story, I don't know her marriage, but it just has made me wonder of, like, if you don't know you have your husband's heart, no wonder you would struggle with the idea that, gosh, a man could be moved by beauty elsewhere. I would also want to say beauty, the depth of awe is meant to follow the depth of knowing. So if you don't, that Adam knew Eve and, therefore conceived, right? That language around sexuality as a form of knowing. It's clear in Song of Songs, these are lovers who know each other. And that their depth of awe and enthrallment with each other follows the depth of their knowing. So, can a man know the woman he passes in the grocery store? Well, he can know a little bit. He can know what she looks like as she passes him. Maybe he can know a little bit about her character based on how she's acting, right? But that's like, 15 seconds, 30 seconds. So is there a capacity for awe in that moment? There is. But is it anywhere near the kind of awe that could follow a long-term relationship with somebody you've sat and been emotionally intimate with over many, many conversations and experiences? Not even close, right? So as a man, the idea that you could be moved by another woman's beauty, it happens. It's natural. It's just the wiring of your arousal. But it's nowhere near what could happen in a marriage, a long-term marriage. So I've thought about that woman and, just heavy about her marriage, not knowing her story. And I don't want to assume there. But, yeah, that would feel like pressure if now I'm competing. And I would say you shouldn't feel like you have to compete. If he knows you and you're being emotionally intimate, there should be a safety to his pleasure and on you.
What is that passage in Song of Psalms where the lover says to the beloved, he kind of enumerates the amount of women available, but then he says something like, but you outshine them all.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. 1,000 women, something, but you outshine them all. Yeah,
That's a rough paraphrase.
Yes.
That text isn't written just so we can be voyeurs to their relationship. Otherwise, it's kind of a purposeless and maybe even a narcissistic book in the middle of the Bible. That doesn't make sense. That entire story is an invitation for all of us. It is a prototypical relationship for us to emulate, which is to say, every lover can and should have that sensation in them. Which becomes paradoxical. It's impossible if we're just being, mathematical about it. If all of the women are stars in the heavens and we're going to measure their radiance like astrophysicists, there has to be one star that's brighter than the rest, just on a level of physics. And yet, in our phenomenology, in our walk-around life, the life that we're invited into with our spouses is one that, for us, they are the most brilliant in all the heavens.
Yes.
Everybody can have that experience.
Yes.
And it does seem like it is in women to burn with a hot, holy kind of a jealousy when that's not present in their story. Jealousy, the way we see God being zealous for Israel. They are supposed to inhabit that station. And let's step into the punch a little bit. When you talk about the pornified culture, there's so many impediments that men and women contend with nowadays. Yeah, just the amount of imaginative baggage they bring into the relationship. So let's just be honest about how hard it is to cultivate that way of thinking, to inhabit that posture of awe. There's occasions where the man is not behaving in a way that's conducive to that end. It's, quite frequent, and in the church is almost identical to out of the church. But then also on the woman's side, the amount of ladies that I see that aren't exactly trying to evoke awe in their husbands either. And then it becomes they're constantly projecting their insecurities on him. And it's like, well, you could try a little bit. And I might get burned at the stake for suggesting that. But it's just running jokes in mom culture. It's like, are we into sweatpants hour? Are you past the point of not caring anymore? Like when a thing gets memeified, it's part of the collective consciousness. And you hear people alluding to, oh yeah, I'm in the chapter where I don't care anymore. Referring to, I'm this old, we've been together this long, he can deal with it. Mm-hmm. And guys the same way. Like, is the man trying to be alluring to his wife? And that generosity that you would bring to each other, because there is a fact of physical beauty. It's not for no reason we see certain individuals throughout Scripture being referred to as beautiful in form and figure. Sarah is given that language. Joseph is given that language. There is an exemplary kind of beauty that they have, and it seems to be distinct from everyone else. So that Sarah was wanted by the most powerful men in Canaan. Joseph was wanted by some of the most powerful women in Egypt. Both of them got into trouble, much of it not of their own making, because they had this huge magnetic aura. And so there is exemplary kinds of beauty where, on a physical level, some people have more than others. And that's just a hierarchy in creation. I'm not making a judgment call on how we're supposed to orient to that right now, but just that it is. That's a thing that can depersonalize some of those hurt feelings in a relationship.
Yeah, and I would say, there's research, a meta study, right? A study of studies that was done to ask the question, are men more visual than women? And what they determined is no. Actually, that men and women are equally visually aroused, visually stimulated.
You spend time on that in the book, don't you?
Yes, I do. Yep. And what I think I would name there is just we've put a lot of beauty pressure on women and not really on men. Mm-hmm. And not that I want there to be pressure on anyone. But I would say, anybody that's fallen in love at some level, it's more than just physical beauty, right? That there needs to be that element of physically, I'm moved by you, but that there's a depth of knowing and intimacy. And, I remember when I met my wife, I fell in love with her beauty. I talk about that in the book. But then we started to have conversations and I was like, oh, wow. Like, it doesn't stop. The beauty isn't skin deep to you. And I would say, in the conversation on sort of midlife or parent life or just long-term relationship, sort of letting yourself go, as you say, like I'm in the I don't care phase, the sweatpants phase. I would say, well, at one level, comfort is a good thing. We're not dogging sweatpants, but I would say, the question isn't just keeping up appearance, but more, are you continuing to cultivate your sense of self? Mm-hmm. And that can get so easily lost. I would say especially the pressure on women, mothers, in mom life, that sense of losing yourself, right? Losing your sense of self, maybe to the exhaustion of the work, the attachment work of little ones, the exhaustion of just the dailies that are demanded. It is so hard to carve out space for your sense of self, right? So that could be literally working out, but it could also be just, are you cultivating who you are, right? Do you have space to continue to cultivate your glory through and through? Same for men, right? There could be a lostness to the same tasks, parenting, work, labor in the home. just the demands of life. And I certainly have felt that pressure myself. My wife and I talk about it regularly. How do we fight for space for each other to stay a separate sense of self? And I would say awe, attachment, and an emotional connection is built on closeness and intimacy and knowing, right? But the awe of arousal and desire, it requires some distance. And what writers, this is from a writer, Esther Perel, she would say that awe lives in the space of the otherness of our partner. And that sense of seeing each other as separate selves growing is an essential part of marriage. She would say that she believes Christians confuse oneness with merger, codependency, enmeshment, and that we need to remember that oneness is not a collapsing of individual selves, nor is it in the Trinity. And so, as you're talking about that letting yourself go, I think of just the space and the need to keep cultivating who you are and growing as an individual.
Yeah, every bit, which, as you said, you have to fight for. The world doesn't just deliver that to you conveniently, unless you're born as an aristocrat, which I think I would have been a pretty good aristocrat if the cards had been dealt that way. Khalil Gibran, he's my favorite poet. And in his poem on marriage, he said, speaking to husbands and wives, he said that drink not, no. He said, fill one another's cup. Fill one another's cups, but drink not from the same cup.
Woo. Amen.
And I love that. As you said, and even if oneness isn't a merger, and also oneness is not sameness.
Yes.
And so to preserve these beautiful distinctions that were part of those initial attractants in the first place, and then to be really dug in for the ride of, man, what is around the corner? Like, what more are you becoming? And that I get to behold this.
Yes.
It seems to me like that's, I think, the biggest killer of so many marriages is the stagnation that they settle into. And that's size of life with people generally. Benjamin Franklin's one-liner, most people die at 25 but aren't buried until they're 75. In the case of a marriage, how many of them mature beyond those just a little after honeymoon years? You settle into career, you settle into the scramble with the kids, you try to manage your finances, but your relationship with each other, how much growing together has happened, and how much growing as individuals has happened that makes it so you have things to grow into together. I think that's the main tragedy I witness.
Yes. Right. In other words, you have so much shared life, that language of sameness, right? So much is the same for us. We come to the same address. We have the same children. We eat the same meals. We have the same routine. We see each other all the time. And again, there's an emotional and relational intimacy there to that shared life that we thrive on. But the tension needs to be held of, where are you other than? Right? Where can I honor? You have a different perspective on, this theology or this political view or this book or your taste in fiction or your taste in movies, or you want to go do this with your friends. You want to have this adventure, and I don't want to do that, right? Empowering each other even still, right? To have those separate places or separate opinions even, right? Like, can you allow your spouse to hold different views than you and bless that and even enjoy the intellectual tug and pull of that? Wow, we get to be intrigued with each other. I think that's essential to healthy sexuality, that's where desire and awe live, in that otherness space.
Did you ever read The Great Divorce?
Yes.
You remember when George MacDonald is guiding Lewis through heaven and he sees the great lady with that very long train of admirers.
Yes.
Because Lewis sees her, and it's just this throng of people behind her.
Yes, that's right.
And Lewis is like, she must have been a great lady. Who is she?
Yes.
And MacDonald is like, laddie, if you'd seen her in the other lands, you wouldn't have known her. Talks about her like she's a very common lady. Nothing especially auspicious about her life. But her virtue, her moral beauty was such that the way MacDonald puts it, he said all of these are her sons and her daughters and her lovers. And Lewis is scandalized by that. He's like, oh man, she was prolific. I mean, look at this.
Yes.
And he's like, no, you misunderstand, laddie. And he says, every boy she encountered became more a son to their mothers. And every suitor she saw became even more a husband to their wives.
Oh, it's incredible.
So there's nothing inappropriate. When you talk about these universal attractants, she was the kind of beautiful that was enchanting, but it provoked a greater virtue in these people. There was no lust in it. It was awe that made them better. Yes,
that's right. And I remember as well, do you remember the section where, I can't remember, there's one of the travelers, in the that comes and he's trying to find the famous painter. And I forget which painter it was, if it was like Van Gogh or somebody. But, he's trying to find this painter and he comes up to an angel and he's like, where's so-and-so? And the angel's like, who? And he's like, what? He's a famous painter. How do you not know him? I know he's here. And the angel says, I don't think I've met him yet. And he's like, how could you not have met him? Right? Like, he has renown. And the angel says, I don't think you understand. We're all famous here. Or, every human is famous here. And I loved that image as well of, heaven being this place where we all shine. Right? Fame and glory are so fickle. This side of heaven, who gets celebrated and experiences the parade that you've just described, right? Of the entourage following this ordinary woman on earth, ordinary, right? And yet, we all have that glory. And I love the image of like heaven being a place where we finally get to experience that awe and celebration. I think we get tastes of that. I think we're meant to get tastes of that in romance, in marriage, other places as well. Community. I think we're meant to, experience people's awe for the glory in us. But marriage being one of those places where it's meant to be on the regular.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like we've talked about the 2-star review response.
Yes.
This is the problem we have, Sam. Every topic we bump into, we have a continually exploding engine diagram of all these components we want to investigate. It's a problem. If you weren't so likable and easy to get along with, we'd have a more straightforward conversation. I actually meant to ask you, your face looks like somebody that is regularly happy. You seem like a joyous man. I've only interacted with you in these settings, but is your baseline temperament pretty happy?
Boy, that's a good question. Yes, it's the place I'm trying to be, and maybe that's true of all of us, right? I think writing this book, shook me. So, and I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but it landed me back in my own counseling. There are certain sections, particularly, and the feedback from folks, and it certainly is not surprising, is there are a couple chapters that are hard. The chapter on the wounded lover and engaging our stories of harm, and then the chapter on killing our own innocence, and how we participate in resorting to a kind of weaponized or power-oriented sexuality driven, by contempt, how we cope with shame and exposure, nakedness, now that we're outside of Eden. And, just it's kind of a walking through, like, here are ways that I've seen men cope with the vulnerability and try to remove the vulnerability of awe and innocent sexuality. So, that landed me just in my own counseling. And so there are times where I'm acutely aware of my own longing for beauty, longing for the glory of God, where I don't live that, where I get drawn into the same energy of our culture. So to say I live here in the space of joy, I long to return there. And a conversation like this gets me there very quickly. You as well, a deep heart. It's helpful. There's such an easy echo back with you. And so there's resonance there that draws me into that space of joy and longing and desire and happiness. But yeah, I also have those despairing places and have to do the same work that I'm asking all the men who read my book to do, which is the warrior and the lover are not that far from each other. In fact, there are writers, Robert Moore, Douglas Gillette, these two writers would say it's the lover that gives the warrior his heart, that gives the warrior kind of his mission as well. And yeah, that last chapter on how your sexuality can change the world, I think just recognizing this takes grit. Beauty is opposed, your arousal is opposed, your awe is opposed by evil. We don't live in a world that wants you to take time for awe. It wants to make beauty consumable. I think it wants to shipwreck you in something like pornography because you'll be near something that's like enjoying beauty, but so far from it at the same time, being commodified. There's not a deep knowing to an experience of pornography. It's vicarious play, which is inherently shameful. You're just watching. You're not actually getting to experience sensuality or play or beauty or awe or arousal or desire in the way it was meant to be. So, I think I feel that. I feel the we're not in Eden sense of things as I walk as a man.
Okay. So when you talk about the corrosive voyeurism of pornography, that's a helpful segue to one of the arguments we've been waiting to have.
Yeah. Okay.
Man, I think somebody is going to fly off the top rope with the people's elbow. We're going to see. I'm messing with you, Sam. We're not going to give us. I am curious to see where this lands, because there's a couple places in the book where I couldn't tell all the way what your conclusion would have been if you had written more at length about it. We alluded to it the last time we talked together. One was your stance on masturbation categorically. And then the other was your stance on nude art and Christians' participation in such things. Why don't we let's talk about the nude art one. So tell me, where is Sam Jolman when it comes to nude art? This is the first time I've seen your face not bright. So now I'm actually, I didn't think I would be concerned, but now I'm like, did I just upset Mr. Jolman? What happened?
No, you did not upset me.
Did we lose our special magic? I don't want that.
It's a delicate space. And so, Paul's words come to mind. Blessed is the man who does not condemn himself for what he approves. Meaning there are things of conscience here, and this is the space of your own gut, your own story, your own growth, your own process. So I do not believe that nude art is inherently wrong. I don't think it's pornographic, inherently. Now, is some of it? Sure, right? Nude art is such a wide swath of a topic, right? Can some of it be banal and degrading? Yeah. But, can you see like Rembrandt's Bathsheba? think it was Rembrandt who painted Bathsheba, and could that be an experience of awe? I believe so, because she's topless in the painting. And is that inherently driven to bring you to lust? I don't think so. And I tell a story in the book about my wife's art journey. She, not every artist, but, it's pretty common for artists to kind of learn their chops and learn their art by doing live nude drawing classes where somebody's paid to disrobe and strike a pose. And you have 10 minutes to sketch or paint or draw the person in that pose, and then they move when their muscles fatigue and do a new pose, and you try again. And this has been art training for a few hundred years, I think, since the masters, the Dutch masters, and so maybe even before that. Forgive my art history, but is that inherently a lustful experience? I think it can actually be a form of awe, and it actually was a part of me healing from my own pornography use, was seeing my wife's sketches and hearing her describe her awe for the human body. And these are sketches of naked people. But there was a way of capturing the body that held its awe, that held its glory. And am I saying that, that's then carte blanche okay? I can't speak for you. I can't speak for any man about that. And you have to, could you also at the same time use it for lust? Of course you could. You have to check the heart. What are you being moved with in terms of your engagement there? But as I say in the book, I believe the body is veiled, meaning we're the only species that wears clothing. And the body is veiled because I think it bears glory. And, it's glorious things in the Bible that are veiled. And so I think marriage and sexual encounter in marriage is one place we unveil, right? Literally a veil is lifted, historically, a tradition of the bride lifting her veil in a wedding ceremony, and that's, I think, intended to mirror, we're going to unveil ourselves, our naked glory to each other. So again, I think it can be, and it certainly was for me, a confrontation of how I had been looking at nakedness through pornography, which was a consumptive click, 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 give me the next image, versus art, which is meant to slow you down, invite you to reflect. And is there a place for that? Again, I'm obviously honoring, for me there was, but you have to sit with conscience there. As far as, well, do you want to pause there before we transition to a conversation on masturbation?
Sure. Maybe a bit of disclosure would be helpful. I have a particular difficulty orienting to the premise that you are proposing. And if we have any disagreement between us, of course, I want it to be convivial and respectful. Very short version of my story. I was stupid lucky in the household I was born into. My grandfathers, my dad, they did not use the vocabulary of awe, but I saw them enchanted by my grandmothers and my mom. And there were conversations we were having. I remember being 12 and my dad doing a really deep dive into the David and Bathsheba event. And I was just kind of sitting in while he's talking to high schoolers, but it was very impressionable. The problem of the second look. David commits no sin. He's not where he's supposed to be. I know the kings are at war, all that. But when he just sees her, there's no sin in that. It's when he decides to gaze on her.
Yes.
That now He has begun the steps toward an affair and a murder and a scandal throughout the kingdom that's going to have generational consequences.
Yes.
12 years old, getting that lesson from my dad. Very, very influential. So today, this year, I'm 43. My wife and I just celebrated 20 years together. We have 6 kids. To this day, the only, I got to grow up without ever having encountered pornography. And so I never discovered it on accident. By the time I was old enough to know what was what, I had all the reasons not to seek it out. And my whole life, I've been able to maintain that. And so the part of my nervous system that is hardwired to respond to the image of a naked woman only has one in its keeping, and that's Adina. That line just feels sacrosanct to me, to not allow any other woman's image into that space. And we can run a thought experiment. If in another career path I was a physician of some kind, there would be scenarios where I might have to see and actually touch a naked woman in giving her medical care. Certainly no sin in that. And I don't know how I would do that with discretion, Like how would I look but not look in that space? When I go to art museums, whether it's a sculpture or a painting, if it's that, it's not for me. And so the instant it registers as that's what it is, I'm looking away. And so I never have time to remember it. It's just a blur of a moment, but there's nothing downloaded. Mm-hmm. And so it's a difficult conversation to enter into without bias. Because I really like what I like what we have. Yes. I like what I have. And my kids, we've raised them in this way as well. They are now the 4th generation of zero interaction with pornography of any kind. And it seems to be a really good setup.
Yes.
I have far fewer struggles in this regard than every other man that I know. Yes. Because of how that upbringing went.
Yes. And I would say amazing. And I'm certainly in no way saying you should go look at nude art.
Sure.
Right? It's like saying you have to like chocolate ice cream.
Well, that is, I think, a point of theology.
Right? Like, and again, I just want to notice there's a bit of blurring of like pornography and nude art that you're making. And I would want to say again, I very much would want to hold those as separate. I'm simply, as I say in the book, these experiences, I happen to have a wife who's an artist who would go to these classes to grow in her art ability, in her education, and would walk me through the line work. And in the process, I said in the book, this was my when Jesus spits in the dirt and creates the mud to open the eyes of the blind man. I said this was one path for me. Now, I don't regularly partake in seeing nude art. It's just not a part of my life. So to say that I do this on the regular, no. I'm simply saying this was an event. And if you find yourself at an art museum, could an art museum be a context that invokes awe?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I won't deliberately blur the lines between what is called pornography and what is called nude art. The intention behind the media certainly matters a lot.
Yes.
And you could, I think, make pornography in which people are fully clothed. You wouldn't reveal genitalia, and yet the intention would be, well, daytime television does plenty of that, I don't care if it's beneath the sheets. You're still getting people to watch other people have sex in this really ugly voyeuristic capacity. So it's not nudity. Nudity is not the only delineation of what categorizes pornography. The design of the thing is inherently corrupt. what I'm proposing is it's worth, like, just calling it nude art does not in and of itself sanctify it.
Yes, I would agree.
Like the label, and that's the thing, like our labeling has been very confused culturally. And what we've inherited in culture, who was it? John Flavel, one of the reformers, he said, antiquity is no passport for errors. And so if we find a tradition that's hundreds of years old, that is not in itself an endorsement of its propriety.
I would agree. Right. So, right. Slavery has been passed down millennia. And, we would clearly define that as an abuse of human dignity, human glory. Just it violates people. So I would agree with you.
Except for Pokemon.
What's that?
Except for Pokemon.
There you go.
Pokemon seems to be permissible enslavement.
Yes. But again, is in Paul's words, everything is permissible. Is everything beneficial? No. So, you have to sit with, should you do this? Am I saying it's necessary? No. And is it, as you say, like, man, I don't want to look. I don't want to have the imprint of that other nudity, even if it's a statue. Amazing. I love that that's your heart. And I'm simply just saying, is any and all nudity inherently harmful, an act of lust, damaging, sinful? And I think I'm just saying, I think some of this comes back to the conversation on modesty. Do we need to blame, because obviously full nudity is one thing, but, two-piece bathing suits, right? Is that inherently wrong for a woman to wear that? And I would say, man, I think it was Dan Allender who said, you should be being able to see a naked woman and still have to own that what your own heart is doing. You can never blame a woman's body for causing you to lust.
Oh, yeah, of course. And I see where you're going with that. What culture you were born into determines what counts as modesty. And in our day, it's gotten so erratic that it's hard to use that term at all without it being offensive. I've had the question for missionaries that have worked in tribal settings where the women are topless and the men wear penis cords. And because I've been curious about this, is this universally erotic? And so are the men mesmerized by the sight of the women's breasts? And I haven't been able to get a missionary to address that for me, to answer if there is sexual allure in that, or if it is just might as well be a shoulder or an elbow. So that is an outstanding curiosity that I have. And it is an interesting kind of a litmus test, right?
Yes. And the other thing I would add here is I'm talking as much about like the David statue,
which
right?
I haven't studied that either.
Right.
Like,
and I've only
I am
seen
as
pictures.
ignorant of other men's genitalia as I am of any other woman's nakedness.
Yeah, right. And the pictures I've seen, I would say, are equally as moving as, I mentioned the painting of Bathsheba by Rembrandt. And I would say, man, I just think there's an invocation and an invitation to awe. These are artists that labored many, 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 many hours, right, to create a representation. And again, as you said, is it just that alone? Is that inherently sanctifying? No. Dignifying of that? No. But could there be an invitation to experience, meaning like, let's say you're in the grocery store and a woman bends over and you see her cleavage, or you're at a pool at a hotel, or you're at the beach and you are aware, of a scantily clad woman, is that inherently a moment where you have no choice but lust, or, you are bound to that? I think there can be a place that you can bless that person's body and say, wow, that's a beautiful woman, beautiful body, and move on.
That's really
and notice
interesting.
beauty.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without
for sure.
having to say, oh man, something just happened inside of me. It's surely lust. Oh my goodness, what's wrong with me? What? Oh, I just felt something.
Yeah.
And I would say, well, what you felt might just be arousal. And it might just be natural to the fact you have a sexualized body, your sexual being, I mean. And you can move on. It doesn't have to be, in other words, what you're naming with your father's language, which was this idea of continuing to look for the sake of lust, right? There's a participation now happening that's beyond simple arousal.
Yeah, agreed. It's one of the things that I've repeated with my kids over the years. We've had early, often ongoing, age-appropriate conversations throughout every chapter of their development. And I hate it. I hate that I'm bringing them up in a world where children have God machines in their pockets that function like a harem in their pants. So you have 8-year-olds sending their own AI porn to each other. I despise that. If that were personified, I would murder it in its sleep.
Yes.
And so I've had to teach my kids, there might be a day where somebody literally throws the phone in your face and says, hey, look at this. If that happens, there is no fault in my child for having been there when this thing assaults them. And it's also true that how they respond is everything. And so I have to give them that prevenient training to resist that moment, to turn away from it, to not. And this is, again, let's go back to Song of Songs, to not stir nor awaken love before it's time.
Yes.
Once that genie comes out of the bottle, it is real hard to put back in. You do remind me of a story. It's 2 monks walking on a path. They get to a creek where they come across a very elegant lady. And she's standing there with her parasol and her long skirt. And she's afraid to cross the creek, delicate feet, doesn't want to get her clothes wet, and maybe she doesn't make it. And so one of the monks condescends and asks if she would like him to carry her across. She acquiesces. He does so, gets across, sets her down. She thanks him. He bids her farewell. And then both of the monks continue walking along the way. So the older monk was the one ferrying her across. The younger kind of disciple monk, he is fussing and cussing all kinds of ways under his breath that his mentor monk picked up this beautiful woman and held her, carried her across the river. So much intimate contact. And then, keeping the temper to himself, after 20 minutes or so, he can't help it. Just explodes, gives it to us, fusses at him. He's like, I can't believe, we've taken vows and you picked her up and you held her. She's a beautiful woman. And the older monk just kind of lets him get it out of his system. And he says, well, I set her down on the other side of the river. Are you still carrying her?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To the pure, all things are pure. So I can entertain the possibility that there is a reckoning and orientation with someone else's nudity to whom I'm not married that could be holy. There's also so many factors in that terrify me that 43 years later, I'm still really slow with that decision.
Yeah, and I would say, there's a reason we veil bodies. And, to say, is that true in every culture to the same degree? No. But, and is that as well a function of just survival, meaning we clothe ourselves to stay warm or to keep out of the elements of the sun? Yeah. But I am in no way saying this should be sought out, per se.
Yeah, I'm not putting you in the bad guy seat, to be real clear.
Yeah. I'm wanting to leave room for blessed is the man who does not condemn himself by what he approves, says Paul. And meaning, speaking of, I think in that case, people who had sacrificed meat to idols or something. And some can eat, some can't. And he's saying, just don't condemn yourself if your conscience is free. And so I'm wanting to leave room for, you're walking through an art museum and you're drawn, moved to awe. Could there be a way to engage that wouldn't be lustful? Yes. Mike Mason, in his book, The Mystery of Marriage, says, curiosity for other people's bodies is even natural. We're intrigued, almost like people watching. And again, am I saying go look at naked people? No, I'm not necessarily saying that. And there's clearly a place where that becomes a kind of voyeuristic consumption. I don't know that we can bear that much glory outside of Eden. There's a sense that we could in Eden know how to be in always just respectful awe, communally, right? But it appears that there's something about our capacity for naked awe that is just too much. That we veil most of the time.
Yeah. It's real interesting when you bring it to an Edenic imagination. Many of the theologians, when they interact with the moment of God asking Adam and Eve, who told you that you were naked? Like, this moment, them learning about nudity, that's revelatory. Ostensibly, beforehand, they did not know that they were naked. And so many of the theologians, both Jew and Gentile, will infer that before the fall, Adam and Eve were robed in light. Their glory was so shimmering that they were veiled in luminescence. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
To have a self-clothing nudity. And then that brings you into all kinds of wonder, like, would that diminish when they're together? Like, do they, in intimacy, do they ever see each other's nudity? Or are they always looking through a veil of light? It does make you wonder quite a lot, what is our most natural state in God's design?
That's powerful, what you're naming. Right, that there's at the very least for us to sit with, the glory of the human figure. It is the artwork of God. And it needs to be reverenced. And what does it mean to reverence? Right? I think most of the time that means to veil. Fully? No, right? And how God invites you, to, I think, ponder that. How are you to reveal yourself to the world? Right? That can be in prideful, degrading ways, or it can be in honoring, glorious ways.
I appreciate your willingness to play it out for a bit. It's never been contentious, but they are heavy ideas, and I think with potentially dire consequences. And so to engage even the topic with a holy kind of dread. In the sexual union, it's not all the time, but there are still, 20 years later, there are moments where it's not anxiousness, but there is a kind of trembling that I experience with my wife. The space is still so holy and sacrosanct.
Yes.
That, like encountering the wild.
Yes.
Whether it's the elements or a creature, this sense of otherness is a wonderful kind of terrifying.
Yeah. Yes, I would agree.
All of that is in me at the thought, at the consideration of sharing that with someone else's visage. And so it might be and if I'm 43, I might as well go the rest of my life, but it does kind of beg the question, like, would there be anything in my life that were improved if I relented on that standard? If anybody else's image crossed that threshold in my heart? It's hard to weigh the scales and to see which way that goes. And my family seems to be an interesting kind of case study in uh, a much less contaminated imagination compared to the surrounding culture. I have to be slow,
Right.
and
words,
I know you're not. I know you're not suggesting anything hasty. And
no,
in your book,
and I
there was nothing heavy-handed. You're open-handed at every part of your book, but this was one that I wanted to chase down a little more with you and just kind of see where it went.
Yeah, and I would want to leave you with, I don't know that there, in Paul's words, is there any benefit to trying to open that door? Yeah, what I hear you saying is, gosh, it does not feel like it. I feel like, in other words, you have cultivated the capacity for awe. And I love what you're naming. What you're describing there is a kind of very alive awe for your wife's body nakedness, right? And I would share the same, married 22 years, and my goodness, her body is staggeringly moving to me. And there is that like, whoa, right? Being a bit undone and overpowered by the glory of her body. And true awe is non-hedonic, meaning it doesn't follow the most pleasures in life dull the more you consume. True awe actually grows stronger. Your capacity for pleasure grows stronger the more awe you experience. So the more sunsets you awe at, the more you can enjoy them, which I love that God made it that way. And so what you're naming is, X number of years into being married, 6 kids later, you have awe. The pleasure of her body has not dulled. It's only, stayed with you and perpetuated. And so, again, that I don't think is the same for a posture of consumptive pornography use. And I think something else is in operation there than awe. And so, yeah. We've tied up no bows right now. And that's maybe as it needs to be, right? This is something that I think people have to sit with God on. And we, do you want to make the transition briefly to pornography or to masturbation?
Well, in respect of your time, I don't know that we can.
Yes. Yeah, that would be another one where, that would be a longer conversation.
Right.
I would agree.
That one's the kind of difficult, I don't want to skate past it fast, like a drive-by.
Thank you. That's good.
It's just too easy to find everything to talk about with you, bud. Good problem to have.
It is a good problem. I'm enjoying it.
Do you have... I've been, I don't think interrogating you, but I have been asking you quite a lot. Is there anything that you want to ask of me before we get out of here?
So 2 things. Can I maybe want to add one more, just therapeutically, pastorally, my heart for people that are listening. I want to just add that, another place, I'm tender about this because you're right. I don't want to set up anybody inadvertently to harm themselves, right? Like, well, Sam says I should go look at nude art. I am not saying that. Simply saying this is one place, a wildly surprising place that God drew me back into awe. I would also say that this was another weird one for me, but as I came out of pornography use, I fell in love with architecture. And that God used architecture as a means of wooing me as well. And, it is human creativity expressed, but the form and function of buildings, I ended up creating, we restored an old Victorian home here in Colorado Springs. And
do you know that that's our story as well?
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah. My question, architecture, man.
Oh, see, so that was going to be my question. Where do you awe? Where has God cultivated awe? And I know we only have a few minutes here, but I would love to hear if there's...
Yeah. I nerd out on architecture. I've recently gotten entranced with Art Nouveau and neoclassicism. I've really liked those. Of course, Gothic architecture is timeless, astoundingly beautiful. I want to go to Prague real bad, because that city is supposed to be the longest surviving catalog of all of the eras of architecture, and yet it still feels like the same city. You know, they have a cultural consciousness of good preservation and growth. Red pandas, I Ching teapots, the ocean big time. I'm a surfer. I miss the sea quite a lot. Mountains do it for me. We have the peaks of Otter nearby. They're gorgeous. My wife's eyes have never diminished in their blueness. And I still experience that holy kind of dread sometimes, where it's captivating and also a little terrifying to maintain her gaze. And she's not a heavy-handed woman. You know, she's not pernicious in any way, but just the imago Dei in her eyes most especially is penetrating in fabulous ways. My kids, when I wrote my book and was imagining a teenage Yeshua, it was really a composite picture of my kids, you know, pulling their best qualities, and they're so good. It felt easy to imagine him with their likenesses in mind. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's eclipses, beautiful. Solar and lunar eclipses. I freaking love eclipses. You talk about transcendent experiences. I think that's the wonder of God's craftsmanship. I've never experienced it more powerfully than beneath a total eclipse.
That's amazing.
I could be an eclipse chaser as a career, and I would love that. Like, this job's pretty good. If I could do a director of outreach and eclipse chaser with a surfboard, that's what we need. I need a travel channel or something.
Yeah. Thank you for answering that. Yes, that's amazing. That could be another hour-long conversation.
Hey, man.
And I'm going to resist because I...
No. I know you got to go. You have an open invitation anytime. If you wanted to be a perennial naked gospel, you are absolutely welcome back, because we keep proving we have a lot of territory to explore.
Yes.
And so if we're cataloging these conversations over years, I would like it a lot.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. I would love it too.
Well, we're going to put some links in the show notes, because we need people to be able to download your free study guide for your wonderful book, The Sex Talk You Never Got. To subscribe to your Substack, we'll have all those links, so it's point and click ready to go. Sam, thank you so much for being such a gracious guest. You're a wonderful interlocutor, a fun conversation partner, and I like you a lot.
Same, Whaler. It's all mutual. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. I'll see you in the future.
Okay, peace.